This network strives to bring you the truth, the stories and the angles not being covered in the mainstream media. And that's not always easy. Sometimes it's simple, as it was with Sandy Hook. The media went into its usual formulaic anti-gun messaging, but instead this network decided to look for the real problems. We dug a little deeper. Do you remember this episode?
The video games are the trainers. I tell my cops, I say, you know what the simulator does for you. You're in the simulator, and the bad guy does this, and boom, you shoot. Stimulus response, stimulus response. And when the bad guy does it in real life, boom, you shoot without conscious thought. You have done what we call precognitive loading. You don't even have to think. A bad guy does this, boom, I'm going to shoot. Well, they have been in their simulators. The gangbangers played Grand Theft Auto since they were 5 years old, every spare minute of every day, practicing blowing cops' heads off. Across America, we have an explosion of gang violence, and they train from their youngest days with the video games.
So we just left one indoctrination, and now let's move to the other. The promotion of violence through Hollywood, TV, and video games gets a total pass from the media. I want to make it very clear. I do not believe in banning television, movies, or anything like that. Just awareness. We are, I think, the only network that is sticking to the truth here on this one. The core of why so many kids and others like them are resorting to such heinous acts. How are kids killing kids now? Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman couldn't confirm it at the time, but he's an expert in the field and he knows when he sees it. Now, that was the past. Let me show you the story that while all of this gun control talk is going on, no one is standing on. CBS News has reported, but then it just disappeared, that Adam Lanza, the guy who was the shooter and the killer in the Sandy Hook massacre, had, quote, a trove of violent video games and would actually black out his game room, so the only reality in the room was his TV screen. The report stated that Lanza also wanted to kill more people than the crazed Norwegian guy who murdered 77 people in July 2011. Lanza apparently chose Sandy Hook because it was the easiest target. Of course, it's a gun-free zone, and also had the largest cluster of people. Lanza saw his victims as merely characters in a video game. Hear me clearly. This is exactly what we reported on the week this happened, that they were mere characters in a video game, and he believed every kill would increase his score. That is exactly what Dave Grossman told us. We are living in dangerous and perilous times. We must do everything we can to keep our family members, our children, and those we know awake for as long as we can. We have to do everything we can to make sure that the heart does not grow cold. Virtual reality is meshing now with reality, and we're at the very beginning of this. Our sons and daughters are becoming desensitized to right and wrong. A few years ago, we stood on the mall in Washington, D.C., and we talked about grabbing onto our kids. We put the country on notice that the time for waving signs had passed, that we were going to pick up the torch. It is time for action, but action that I never saw coming. If your kid is playing these video games, you have to step up now. I beg you, pray on it if you want confirmation. I'm not preaching to you. I'm going through this now with my own 2 kids, and they just want to play video games. My son is really into Minecraft. I look at it and I'm like, it's not that bad, but I'm telling you, let your kids play with it for a while, and before you know it, it's all they talk about. I'm trying to convince now the friends, or his friends' parents, our friends, to not allow video games to be played when he is over. I mean, it's tough, but the only way we'll survive is if we pull together as a team. Video games for our children, not for adults, but video games are a gateway drug for our kids. And instead of a high, They get a numbness. They get an indifferent heart and a mind that cannot tell the difference between fiction and reality. This is medical fact. This is not crazy theory. Growing up, I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and I loved spring because there was just a few days where we could actually play outside. And in those days, we couldn't afford anything but our imaginations. But it was more than enough. I am fortunate enough to have a place now in the mountains where we have just a little farm, and these are a friend's horses, and we just go spend our summers there. And everybody, I'd say the kids, but everybody in the family hates it at first, for the first day or so, because there's no electricity. There's none of any of the gadgets that we have easy access to normally. There's no phones, there's no computers, there's nothing. And everybody moans and complains for a while. But then we detox. It takes us 1 or 2 days. And one by one, we all stop thinking about the phones or the TV or the whatever gadget it is. And everybody, one by one, discovers each other, and our children discover their imagination. And they realize that their imagination is far more fun than any toy or any phone or any iPad could ever be. Sticks and rocks and bugs and trees are no longer the complaint, but the canvas. And boy, can kids create. It's amazing to see what they actually will come up with next. As strange as it may sound, my favorite memory, the happiest moment of my vacation last summer, was when we were up at the ranch and my kids came in and they asked for a jar with a lid. I knew exactly what they were doing, and I took out a nail and we put holes in that lid. I can't wait to go back and chase a cow, throw a rock, be simple, because life is good when life is simple.